Hello, my name is Kevin Otieno, and I want to take you through what's, of course, contained on the BBC website. Now, when you listen to their programs on radio, on the World Service, that is, they tell you that you can head on to their website for more information. And here I have come, and on this page, at the very bottommost part of the section titled Sudan, there is the editor's note. Of course, having told the followers of their news on the website that uh, they will resume the following day. And of course, there's this. Thanks for joining us. That was posted 21:05 hours on the 16th of April. That we're going to pause our live coverage of events in Sudan, but there are other places you can go to for the latest updates, and of course, they talk about those. But today in the morning at 9:03 hours, a story by James, no, the website of the, I don't know, the stories editor, yeah, James Fitzgerald. Of course, they go here as live reporter. That's their title, and he's glad to announce at 9:03 hours that we're back with live, further live coverage of the fighting in Sudan. Almost 100 civilians have now died, says the country's doctors' union, and more violence has been reported this morning, with residents reporting sustained gunfire in the capital, Khartoum. The conflict, which is now in its third day, is between the army and a rival paramilitary force. Stay with us as we bring you live updates, and that's exactly what I want to take you through, even though it's not live. It's some hours since these posts were made, but of course they still remain relevant to the point that they serve the informational role and of course building our understanding collective and individual of the situation in Sudan. So at 9:11, they posted a story here: clashes show need for return to civilian rule, former minister says. The clashes between the military and the paramilitary Rapid Support Force show the clear need for reform of Sudan's security apparatus, Sudan's former foreign minister has told the BBC. Mariam al-Sadiq al-Mahdi says heavy gunfire can still be heard around the capital Khartoum, including reports of the use of artillery on social media. She is a member of Sudan's former civilian government, established after the overthrow of former dictator Omar al-Bashir in 2019, and itself then displaced by a coup in 2021. Speaking to the World Service's Newsday program, Al-Mahdi says traditional reporting in the country has collapsed, and each side is giving out contradictory reports of what areas of the city they control. And the former minister, is quoted here as saying, "This has demonstrated in the clearest way there must be reform for this security system. This security system now is attacking its own people. The army must go back to the barracks and civilians must rule for a transitional period for a short time, then move to free and fair elections." The minister is quoted, the former minister is quoted as saying. Then at 9:18, 7 minutes later, the website received a story here titled US and UK call for end to hostilities. And the editor or the team said, let's bring you some international comment. First, from US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who says the White House has been, well, quote unquote, consulting very closely on the situation in Sudan. He says there is a shared view among allies that hostilities should be ended immediately with a return to talks. Blinken's British counterpart, James Cleverly, meanwhile, has called on the generals involved in the fighting to put peace first. And those last four words are attributed to him, to put peace first. Then at 9:28, a story was posted here titled, "Why is there fighting in Sudan?" That is a very important question that we must, try to answer. And there's an image here obtained from the Reuters news agency, which shows an airport. I believe this is an airport. I can see the runway and a dark cloud of smoke billowing from the ground into the sky, which is equally gray. But let's see. Since a coup in October 2021, Sudan has been run by a council of generals, and there are two military men at the center of the dispute. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who is the head of the armed forces and in effect the country's president, that's on one part, and his deputy and leader of the Rapid Support Forces RSF, General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, better known as Hemedti. Do we call him Hemedti? Hemedti. They have disagreed on the direction the country is going in and the proposed move towards civilian rule. One of the main sticking points is over the plans to include the 100,000 strong RSF into the army, and who would then lead the new force. The violence follows days of tension as members of the RSF were redeployed around the country in a move that the army saw as a threat. There had been some hope that talks could resolve the situation, but these never happened. It is not clear who fired the first shot on Saturday morning, but there are fears that these hostilities could worsen an already unstable situation. Alright, that was the latest. Then at 9:36, a story came in. Of course, saying people in Sudan want the military back in the barracks. Those are words attributed to Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States of America, speaking in Japan. Let's bring you more of those comments from Antony Blinken, who's called for an immediate end to the violence. Speaking to reporters, Blinken said there was a deep concern about the fighting and violence in Sudan, especially the threat posed to civilians. People in Sudan want the military back in the barracks. They want democracy, he said. They want a civilian-led government. Sudan needs to return to that path. He is quoted by the BBC as saying, and there's an image here of him, Blinken that is, and his British counterpart, James Cleverly, speaking to the media in Japan earlier today. That's also attributed the photo to Reuters news agency. Another image here also shows the two with, of course, Cleverly speaking, yeah, and he's saying put peace first, urges Cleverly. And here is more from UK's Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, who's with his American counterpart Antony Blinken in Japan for a G7 foreign ministers meeting, noting that his department had already advised against travel to Sudan. Cleverly says one of his top priorities has been to make sure British nationals at the embassy in Khartoum are safe and accounted for, and those safe and accounted for words are attributed to him, in quotes, and are receiving support from London. He continued to say, but ultimately, the immediate future lies in the hands of the generals who are engaged in this fight, and we call upon them to put peace first, to bring an end to the fighting and to get back to negotiations. That's what the people of Sudan want. That's what the people of Sudan deserve, and we will continue to seek ways to support that road back to peace. Let's bring you more of those comments from Antony Blinken, who called for an immediate end to violence. I believe you've read that. I believe you've heard that. So these guys are in Japan for a G7 foreign ministers meeting, and then at 9:59, a minute to 10 in the morning, The BBC website received a story titled, "We're running out of food and water." That's a quote attributed to perhaps a local in Sudan, a Sudanese. People in Sudan's capital Khartoum are running out of food and water after 3 days of heavy fighting, a human rights activist tells the BBC. Dua Tariq says activists are organizing peaceful resistance to military rule in the wake of the violence and calling for a peaceful transition to civilian government in Sudan. But she says people have been without power for 2 days. Shops were closed and local residents did not have time to restock on supplies in many parts of the capital. Tariq tells the BBC World Service Newsday program that the sound of explosions and gunfire are particularly loud this morning as the fighting continues in cities around Sudan. She adds the situation is terrifying, quote unquote, for her family, as her sister and young nephew have fled even fiercer clashes nearby to stay with her. Without food and water, it's worrying right now, she's quoted as saying, and then there's an image there of an urban setting, I believe, of the capital. Yeah, the caption says Sudanese capital. Smoke rises above the Sudanese capital on Monday. That's the photo caption, and of course, it gives you a sense of what's happening in that country, or at least as reported in the morning at 9:59. Then at 12 minutes, the BBC, the editor, posted or allowed this story to come on the website so that we can read it. 3 African presidents to mediate Sudan. An East African regional grouping plans to send 3 presidents to Sudan at the earliest possible time to reconcile the fighting rival military groups. The Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, agreed on Sunday to send the leaders of Kenya, South Sudan, and Djibouti to the capital Khartoum. It also called for an immediate cessation of hostilities between the warring parties in Sudan. But with the international airport closed, it's uncertain when any peace initiative can begin. As we've been reporting, fighting between government forces and the Rapid Support Forces (RSF) is continuing today despite pleas by the international community to warring parties to cease fire. Kenya's President William Ruto asked IGAD leaders to take a firm position to restore peace in Khartoum. The story's author has not been mentioned yet, or even if they are authors, but we will discover some of them in the course of this reading or in the course of our listening. So let's carry on. At 10:20, Yoweri Museveni is posted here and quoted as saying that we cannot keep papering over mistakes of unprincipled politics year after year. President Museveni, he said, is reported here to have said on Sunday while addressing a regional African grouping, IGAD, mentioned in our previous post. But of course, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has condemned the misuse, quote-unquote, misuse of force in the Sudan crisis, saying the fresh fighting undermines all progress made through dialogue over the last several months. And of course, the story continues to say that Museveni, who was among the mediators of the Sudan conflict, said and he's quoted here as saying, unconditional and immediate cessation of hostilities to stop the tragedy and mockery of Africa is of utmost importance. He blamed Sudan leaders of what he termed as ideological and strategic governance errors, saying even fighting must be for principled causes. The Ugandan leader said the ultimate arbitration on Sudan's political crisis should be brought back to the people in an election. The two rival Sudanese military groups had in recent months made progress towards the formation of a new civilian-led transitional government, but the groups disagreed on, among other things, the timelines for the absorption of the Rapid Support Forces (RSF) into the regular army. The divisions delayed a political deal aimed at re-establishing civilian rule by 11th of April this year. Another story comes up at 10:26, and that's why we are here to read it. The turmoil since the fall of Bashir. That's the headline. Although we are reporting that nearly 100 civilians have died in the latest violence in Sudan, we should clarify that the fighting itself does not directly involve civilians, but is instead within the country's armed forces. I believe you already said that at the start of our reporting, but let's carry on. What's important now is the latest upheaval since the toppling of Sudan's long-serving President Omar al-Bashir in 2019. Afterwards, the military promised a transition to civilian rule, but protesters who had a role in ousting Bashir vowed to stay on the streets and demanded a role in the government. A joint military-civilian government was then agreed in August 2019, which was supposed to pave the way for elections. But there were tensions between the sides, and 2 years later the military staged another coup. Since then, attempts to resurrect the plan to move towards civilian rule have hit problems, and the fresh hostilities center on disagreements between the head of the army and the leader of a paramilitary force. There's an image here of the former president, the ousted president Omar al-Bashir, who was overthrown, as you've heard in the report, in 2019 after decades in power. The image is attributed to the AFP. Then at 10:43, Emmanuel Igonza came up with a story, of course, from Nairobi, saying heavy gunfire and explosions can be heard in the Sudanese capital this morning as fighting between the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces continue for a third day. Residents in Khartoum tell us that they remain stuck in their homes even as food and water supplies dwindle. The Sudanese Doctors Union, I should say, has warned that the death toll, estimated at 97, could rise even further. And of course, the former minister of Sudan is quoted here as saying that people are besieged inside their homes without supplies. We have run out of food while we're fasting during the holy month of Ramadan. There are also shortages of water supplies to the homes and electricity as well. Those are words attributed to Mariam al-Sadiq al-Mahdi, the former Sudanese Foreign Affairs Minister and member of the civilian government. That's a story that was posted, as you've heard, at 10:43. At 10:58, while I was weeding here in the village on Rusinga Island, Emmanuel Igunza reported from Nairobi saying that it's really bad and we don't know when it will end. That obviously is a quote. As the fighting continues, hospitals in the capital and elsewhere are struggling to treat hundreds of injured. Besieged hospitals are running short on medicine and unable to operate oxygen machines due to a lack of electricity. Former Foreign Minister Mariam al-Sadiq al-Mahdi told the BBC earlier. I believe you may have already heard that. They have used all the gasoline they have to run the generators, she said. It is really very, very bad, and we don't know when it will end. Aid agencies have also suspended their activities despite a drought that's left millions in need of assistance. Emmanuel Igunza's story there. We head on to the next story that was posted at 11:17, which says it's a video story actually, and it's cueing you to watch something here. As we've been mentioning this morning, civilians have found themselves caught up in days of hostilities between Sudan's army and a paramilitary group. On Sunday, we spoke to eyewitnesses who had been sheltering with their families as fighting continued in the capital, Khartoum. Watch the video below to see what it's been like for them. Can we watch this? And will that be recorded in good quality? I wonder, but let's see. Sudan fighter jets, gunfire, and explosions shock Khartoum. As the video goes, I think we will try to skip to the next story and even forget it. At 11:24, a story came through titled "Unclear Who's in Control of Sudan as It Stands." That's a story by Ahmed Mohamed Abdi for the BBC Monitoring. Okay, he said that it is not clear who is in charge in Sudan. And there's an image, of course, obtained from Reuters of people in a pickup truck, someone in a pickup truck, and of course it's a highway, vehicles on the highway, I believe in Khartoum, and there is smoke in the distance. The vehicles are town bound or CBD bound, or one can say that they're moving in the direction of the smoke, going to where the smoke is coming from. That's another thing that you can also check out on the website as well. It is not clear who is in charge in Sudan. Conflicting narratives have emerged as deadly clashes continue, having broken out early on Saturday between the Army, SAF, and the powerful paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF. Nearly 100 civilians have been killed as violence spread from the capital Khartoum to other cities. In the absence of state media, which abruptly halted live broadcasts after clashes at its headquarters in Omdurman, the SAF and the RSF, those two conflicting forces, have predominantly used social media to issue competing statements. These have included claiming control of strategic sites such as command centers, air bases, and the presidential palace. The clashes are underpinned by a power struggle between the army chief and the country's de facto president, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and his deputy, who also commands the RSF, General Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemeti. Since hijacking a popular civilian uprising to oust long-serving President Omar al-Bashir in 2019, the army has concentrated power around itself. At 11:29, the website allowed this story to appear here. Sudan, the basics. If you're coming to this story fresh, here are 4 key things to know about Sudan. Vast and diverse, the North African country was once the largest nation on the continent. That, I believe, was before the split between Sudan and or the split into Sudan and South Sudan. It was vast, but right now it's not as vast as it was. Obviously, internal conflict. Sudan has long been beset by violence. 2 rounds of North-South civilian war cost the lives of 1.5 million people, and a continuing conflict in the western region of Darfur has, of course, driven 2 million people from their homes and killed more than 200,000. The latest violence stems from a rift between 2 military men. The 2011 split. After the people of the South voted to become their own country, the government gave its blessing to South Sudan, where the mainly Christian and animist people had for decades been struggling against rule by the Arab Muslim North. Long-standing issues, questions of shared oil revenues and border demarcation have continued to create tensions between the 2 successor states. And there's a map below, but let's see. And our map below shows key locations in the capital Khartoum, which you might be reading about in connection to the latest hostilities. You appreciate the fact that some people are not map literate. They don't know, they don't have the skills to read it, but I believe that the BBC is not broadcasting for the feeble-minded, though the weak. I don't know. I don't know what to characterize them as. You don't want to call them fools. because that would be foolish in itself. But at 11:53, the BBC posted a story here saying children trapped after sheltering in schools. The BBC has spoken to a charity worker who's been sheltering with her son in a school in Khartoum since the fighting began 3 days ago. Katharina von Schroeder from Save the Children says they had hoped things would calm down when they arrived in search of shelter, but decided to stay put after clashes in the city escalated and spread to outside the capital. She says several hundred children at least are trapped in similarly dangerous circumstances around Khartoum, but adds reports of local authorities rescuing some are circulating. Describing an incredibly confusing situation on the ground, von Schroeder says the one saving grace is internet services are still functioning, which allows people to communicate and receive updates about what is going on. And she's quoted here as saying, so there is a huge flow of information constantly, but there is a lot of conflicting information, so it is very confusing situation. I just got a call from the German embassy that by no means we should move. Katharina von Schroeder there talking to the BBC. At 12:12 hours, a story came up on the website saying, watch, it's a video story. Attack helicopter flying low over Sudan's capital. A video posted on social media shows an attack helicopter flying low over Khartoum. Did I say helicopter or helicopter? Flying low over Khartoum as smoke billows in the background from the city's international airport. I believe I already mentioned that, but there is a 13-second video here. I wonder if my internet connection is strong enough as to allow this to be loaded for us to capture the sound, but as it does that, we will try to load another story. At 12:26, the BBC said, where are battles being reported this morning? Where are the battles coming from, or where are they being witnessed? Which are the hotspots in Khartoum? Alright, is Khartoum a hotbed of military action right now? The situation on the ground in Sudan is very unclear, with heavy fighting between the Sudanese Armed Forces, that is the SAF, and the Paramilitary Rapid Support Force, RSF, continuing for a third day. Airstrikes, heavy gunfire and artillery explosions have been widely reported by local outlets on social media and in interviews local residents have given to the BBC over the last few hours. We are working hard to get a clearer sense of what's happening where. In the meantime, here is a quick summary of some of the key areas where violence has been reported this morning. Around the Republican Palace in the capital Khartoum, that's one hotbed of violence, I believe, because only the army, the opposing foes, the paramilitary, are fighting there. As the Sudanese, we also have another site at the Sudanese Army Command building in the same city. Another spot that you need to check if you're around there is at or near Al-Shabaab hospital in Khartoum. That's different from Al-Shabaab, and I apologize for that huge slip of the tongue. Smoke has been filmed rising from the runway of the city's international airport, and I already spoke to us about that. RSF fighters claim to have taken control of Miro Airport. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation. Around 200 miles or 320 kilometers to the north of the capital, but the BBC has been unable to verify this. Then there is a map here of the country, or rather of Khartoum, where the action is taking place, and you might as well head on to the website and check it out. At 12:47, I should say, James Copnell. James Copnell. I usually hear him on Newsday, from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. East African time. He usually features one Bola Mosuro. Well, there was a day I heard a lady named Victoria, and today I heard a couple of other reporters as well as James Copnell. He sat there giving his balanced, Sudan analyst opinion. That of course the BBC regards him as BBC. They state him, or they give him the title BBC Sudan analyst, and he says here, conflict intensifying and peace in short term unlikely. And his thesis statement states, my guess is a negotiated solution to this conflict is not likely to happen in the short term at any rate. Over the weekend, General Hemeti of the Rapid Support Force RSF called Sudanese Army General Burhan a dog, talked about hunting him down and called him a criminal, while the army have basically said they will not stop until the RSF is dissolved. While these are statements from a few days ago, they show the mindset both sides have right now. It is also my feeling that the intensity of the conflict has increased today, certainly compared to yesterday. Speaking to friends in Khartoum, Durman, and of course other places, they are talking about airstrikes carried out by the Sudanese armed forces. Presumably, they are targeting RSF bases, who are then firing back up at the planes. So this is urban warfare between two heavily armed forces, and neither side appears willing to back down. My initial feeling is we're likely to see a lot more fighting over the next few days, and perhaps when it becomes clear which side will win, perhaps we will get closer to talks. Although it's a difficult picture to fully discern, it seems like the Sudanese military have the upper hand, backed by that air power. Well, and that, I should say, is the latest that I can see here on the BBC website, bbc.com / World News Africa. I can see Africa News here. That's what I've been reading for us for the past 33 minutes, and so it's a good point in time to stop. Call me Kevin Otieno or Trubats. Thank you for listening.